fell off my bike yesterday.
Oh dear. Go on, what happened?
Well, no, I was mountain biking. So
Snazzy.
this woodland where there's like footpaths and etc. I go when no one's around, so I either go really late at night or early in the morning. And I went yesterday, and there's one bit that no one goes around apart from me. And then there's kind of like this off-camber section. It was a really comedic fall. The front fell on me, so I kind of caught it, stood up, tried to get going again. But the bike's my dad's mountain bike because I don't have one, and it's a bit too big for me. So I lost it, and then fell down the hill right into a tree, and it really hurt my knee.
Right. Yeah, are we good to kick off?
I'm ready when you are.
Brilliant. What do I say again? Hello, and welcome to Something Near the Centre, a podcast about politics, economics, and current events. I'm James.
I'm Will.
And this week, we're going to be having a chat.
Again. I feel like I always say that.
Round 4.
Possibly the most dramatic.
Well, it's been a heavy news week and a light news week at the same time, really, hasn't it? One news story's dominated the headlines, and then nothing else has really happened.
I think we've finally had one exciting news story. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It is related to coronavirus, but it's actually politics. And we can somehow not talk about coronavirus in this.
We can and we can't. It's,
it is related, but like...
Yeah, it's all caused by coronavirus, but it's just a political issue within itself.
Yeah.
So we'll just start off straight away. What is the issue? What's the big headline?
So the news story is Prime Minister's Special Advisor, Dominic Cummings, has driven 160 miles on March the 31st when lockdown rules were strongly in place when his wife was developing coronavirus symptoms. And he says it was to look for better childcare. But there's obviously been loads of outrage from the media and public itself because it's kind of seen as, oh wait, we get one rule while the establishment abides by another, and they'll just completely get away with it again. So that's basically the whole gist of the news story at the moment. And while we're speaking, Dominic Cummings is set to make an announcement, a public statement at 4 o'clock. We're now recording this at 3:15, and he's set to take questions as well. So, James, what do you think is going to happen in this press conference with Dominic Cummings?
Well, I think it'll be... I'll bring in a tweet that James O'Brien said. Dominic Cummings launched a campaign within Brexit to get rid of unelected bureaucrats, and now we're taking press conferences for them. So I just thought that was quite...
He said... One thing that's always stuck with me about Dominic Cummings was the whole get rid of EU bureaucrats, yet he's become a bureaucrat himself. He's essentially running the country.
My take on it is I can understand why... If you read the press releases, I can understand why he did it, right? Now, I'm not saying it was within the rules and it was the dire emergency... that it's being made out to be. But if it wasn't Dominic Cummings, right, and it was, say, Rishi Sunak, who probably one of the nation's favourite cabinet ministers, if it was Rishi doing it because he was ill and he had to look after his family, I don't think there would have been the uproar or as much of it, right? Dominic Cummings is not a popular figure, and so the reason this has gone so hugely, stratospheric is because of that. It's being used as a stick to bash him with. Is something he's done which is against the rules, but I just feel like it's been escalated because he's Dominic Cummings and not because it's like the biggest scandal this country's ever seen.
I think, I mean, just slightly disagree, I think it's because even if it was Rishi Sunak or Michael Gove or any of the cabinet ministers, it's because they're implementing this policy. And bearing in mind, Dominic Cummings has probably written this policy as well of stay indoors, stay home, save lives, protect the NHS, etc. And the fact that he's broken his own rule, that's where it comes from, of like the outrage of, oh, we've all done our bit, but yet you, the people who are creating this and meant to be running the whole show, are blatantly disagreeing with it and blatantly undermining this rule as well. And I think that's where the outrage comes from. And I think that's one problem the Tory party will have from now on, is always be seen as the Conservative establishment as well does what it wants. In the time when we needed it locked down the most, the Conservative establishment was still disobeying rules, as can be seen with Dominic Cummings. That's where I see the outrage coming from.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I still think that it has been escalated more because of him. So, like, Robert Jenrick went to live in a second home, and that was in the newspapers for a day, and then it went. It doesn't help that whilst, taking questions from people, Dominic Cummings was a bit rude.
But did Robert Jenrick create the whole policy.
He's the Secretary for Housing and Communities, which is, important within the coronavirus. But I get the fact that Dominic Cummings is someone who's at the heart of government, and so it does become more of an issue in that sense. But if you listen to the official Downing Street press release about it, I don't think it's a huge issue, as in the fact of what he did, if the facts are all there.
But this is when the rules were, you cannot go out of your house unless you're going for an hour of exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
Going for food, or it's an essential journey, and he's going to go around his grandparents.
The line is that it was for childcare, but the thing is, I don't know the full specifics of how long he stayed. And I know he was staying in a building that was within his parents' land. I think it was like a little outbuilding annex sort of thing that he was staying. And his sister, who lives up there, was going to help with childcare. And so he could stay up there in his parents' annex, despite them not providing the healthcare. So it was a place to stay whilst that was happening. But yeah, you're right. This is at the point where we had the strongest lockdown. It had only just been initiated. The rules, it was at that point, it was, exactly. They came out on the 23rd and it was the 31st. So that's how close it was to the initiation of the lockdown, which does make it a bigger issue, because it's not like he's gone now and stayed in their house. It is a huge issue, but all I'm trying to say is that Dominic Cummings being Dominic Cummings is key to the fact that this is a huge issue as opposed to a big issue. There was a tweet from the civil service. Go on, I'll hand it over to you, Will. You can explain it.
So the UK civil service tweeted out yesterday. It was only for about 2 minutes it was up, and they tweeted it. Arrogant and offensive, can you imagine having to work with these truth twisters? The UK civil service is kind of like the support for the government. It's like they're divvied up into departments. So like you see Matt Hancock, he's Health and Social Care Secretary, so he runs his own department, and they're full of civil servants, same with the Treasury, etc. And the reason for that tweet, it's been brewing probably since Boris took office as Prime Minister and Dominic was appointed as his special advisor. So Dominic's a very maverick character, and I think the way he wants the civil service to be is people who think a bit more outside the box rather than the run-of-the-mill, oh, you went to university, oh, you're a man in the suit, and you all think the same, because in what he sees is where do the next great ideas come from, and he's wanted to reform it like that ever since. And I think there's been ever more growing friction between the civil service in maybe decisions, the way the government's taking it, or the way Dominic's running it, very number 10 focused, is what sparked that tweet. And yesterday was just the straw that broke the camel's back, and civil service broke like that. Like there's been reports of bullying, etc. Like there've been growing friction between the civil service and the government due to its handling on Brexit. And he's very much the way Dominic works, he's very much, we're going 100% or it's nothing, which has very much caused friction, as well as I think they wanted to do compromise, etc. And yesterday, it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, and it forced them into the civil service making that tweet, which was extremely ill-advised. And if I was in government or a Conservative supporter, I would be tearing my hair out as why have they put that on. But equally, you could work that to your advantage now. As you could say, not even the civil service is working for us now. We need a total overhaul of the system to get things done the way we need to be after coronavirus. So
yeah. So Cummings is a very divisive character, just in the sense that he wants to get what he wants, and if he doesn't, then he's not a happy guy. In that sense, and lots of things that he wants in an unconservative way almost. He believes that lots of the institutions and the traditions and the conventions that have been going on in the past aren't quite right for a modern 21st century government. And so he is pushing for change and radical overhaul of certain things in to do with politics and governance in the country, which doesn't make him a popular guy. It's also the fact that he's seen to be running the show almost behind Boris Johnson. He's the sort of puppeteer pulling the strings, etc. Mm-hmm. And so all of that just amounts to him not being not seen as a very pragmatic guy. He's not very popular in the media. He's not very popular with lots of the public just because he's not elected. I think we've got to point out the fact that Dominic Cummings is a very intelligent person. Right, and
no, he is.
So regardless of what you think of him, a friend of mine who probably listened to this, shout out to them, described him as an evil genius. Okay, and so obviously there it points it out he's not a very well liked person, and because he is a genius, he comes up with so many solutions of different things. He's the mastermind behind the Brexit campaign. They were fighting almost like an uphill battle there. and they ended up turning around the country. That's one of the reasons why the government are quick to defend him and don't want to, force him to resign or fire him, is simply because he is necessary as an intelligent mind in an incompetent government, right? So, if they were to shed Dominic Cummings, then they'd be reducing the average intellect. But lots of people want him out simply because he's not elected. He wants, he tries to get what he wants, and he doesn't seem to be able to compromise or stick to his own rules. Almost potentially sees himself as above other people.
I think me and you have both talked about this as well. I do not agree with him on most things, but I have this weird sort of admiration for him. Like he is a genius. Like some of his campaigning, especially for the Euro No campaign, the Leave 2016 campaign. I know it was controversial, but it worked. And the way he speaks to, he talks about emotive things and not just using fiscal policy, blah blah blah, using very much the stats. He very much appeals to the heart, and that's what he's done since the proposed entry to the single market back in 2000. And he's just a genius campaigner, and there's nothing more I can say about that. But he always says something really fascinating of don't hate your enemy because it blinds your judgment. And I think that's what people like me need to do. I strongly dislike the man. I don't hate him, but I always want to learn from him where he wants to go for that. But the reason why I think the government haven't let go of him yet is he was appointed as a special advisor to Ian Duncan Smith when he was appointed in 2001. And he only lasted 8 months in the job. But after he came out, bang, he taught into them left, right and centre. Went on BBC Breakfast, etc. Very much ruined Ian Duncan Smith as leader. He wasn't that good anyway because he was seen out of touch. But he just further cemented the image of him. And I think Boris is very much afraid of if he lets him go, what's going to happen? Because it's very much his way or the highway. I'm concerned if I was Boris now, the political capital that he'll lose by losing him will be a lot more damaging in the long run. If I was Boris now, I think this is a really hard decision, but I'd try and distance myself from him publicly, but make sure I keep close contact with him at all times. So you know what I mean?
The government have hired a new guy, right? They have brought in... On Thursday evening, it emerged that Boris Johnson had shaken up his top team in Downing Street and brought in Simon Case, the Duke of Cambridge's private secretary, to lead the response to the COVID crisis. Case, a former number 10 aide under David Cameron and Theresa May, was already on secondment to the Cabinet Office, but now he's becoming a permanent secretary in Downing Street. So, what that means is already, and the article goes on to talk about that, there's another person who's been brought into government almost to distance Cummings from the civil service. He's almost going to be like a bit of a middleman.
Yeah.
He's also been put in charge of tackling as an advisor, he's going to be like the key COVID political advisor rather than like a scientific advisor for the strategy to take and things, opening schools or whatever it might be, easing the lockdown in more of like a political sense than medical. But this also brings the issue is that Dominic Cummings either wants to be the top man or he's not bothered. Does that make sense? So it's similar to the my way or the highway. It's not just if you don't do what I want, then I'm not going to be happy. It's also he wants to be the top advisor. He won't become an ideas man, which is what the government probably would quite like him to do. If Dominic Cummings could just be kept in a little broom cupboard underneath the stairs, and every 3 months you could open the door and say, "Hi, Dominic, can we have an idea, please?" And then he'd rattle off something, come back to you 2 weeks later with an amazing scheme that you could do to revolutionise the whole transport infrastructure, whatever it might be. That's what the government would love to do, because Dominic Cummings is such a powerful, strong-minded figure. And as you were saying, Will, he poses a threat politically if he gets kicked out because he's been at the heart of number 10. He can have a tantrum in front of the media, which would just be hugely politically damaging for Boris.
So he said he doesn't have a political party, even though he works for the Conservatives at the moment. He doesn't have an allegiance to anyone. He just wants to run it his way, which is quite scary, but I think that's even more damaging for the Conservatives at the moment, but especially if he comes out.
So with all that said, that's why Dominic Cummings is and probably has to stay, despite him just adding to the reasons in the media that he shouldn't be liked. There's kind of no option but to keep him, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a very hard choice for Boris. I don't think he'll go in the slightest, but I would imagine right, I lose the guy with a load of ideas that's basically won me the Brexit referendum and the 2019 general election, and I need him going forward because he's such a political figure and political force for me. But however, most people don't like him. Not even people in the Tory party now are starting to get really annoyed and fed up with him. So do I want to rage this new growing war inside the Tory party again over Dominic Cummings, along with the civil service, or do I get rid of him and potentially have him risk the rest of my political premiership, and I don't have any new ideas coming in because there's no one as good as him in that job at the moment?
The lose-lose. Yeah,
It's a
lose-lose
lose-lose situation for the Conservatives at the moment. Well, this whole coronavirus thing would have been a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, and this is just, adding further to it. You were talking about MPs who are calling for him to be sacked. So, for example, Steve Baker, prominent Tory backbencher, previous Brexit secretary, he called in an interview for him to resign. There's many others that want him to go. The chief whips in Downing Street, so the whips are kind of people in the party who, as the name whip suggests, their job is to discipline and keep all the MPs in line to make sure, for example, if there's a vote, that they all stick and vote with the party and there's not really many rebellions, etc., etc.
The name whip came from, they used to, like back in the 1800s, they used to have an actual whip to try and enforce party discipline, and that's where
it wasn't probably used. It was more symbolic, right?
Yeah,
they weren't smacking the MP.
They still do have a whip.
Yeah. So the whips called on sort of senior and junior ministers to back Dominic Cummings, and lots of them didn't, as well as MPs. And so that when a whip asks you to do something, it's usually good for your political career to nod along and say yes, okay, because
it's good for you to advance. If you want to advance your political career onto the front bench, you desperately want to impress the chief whip.
Exactly.
And have a strong party discipline all the way through, whereas you get people like Peter Bone, who's a famous Tory rebel, is one of the whip's worst nightmares because he very regularly votes against the government or will criticise the government as well.
It's probably quite self-explanatory, but the reason you really want to impress the whips is simply just because if you're backing the government, right, as a way to reward you for that, so for supporting the government in what they want to get through, if you're, handling it well in the media and you're saying, yeah, this is a great idea and you're voting with it, etc., 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 you're improving the government's political power. So as a way of rewarding that, you'd expect, for all your discipline and your loyalty to the party, rewards with political progression through your career. So you'd go from being an MP to a junior minister to, potentially on and on to your cabinet minister, however far you end up going in the world. And so my point with this is, with many junior ministers who could see themselves to be in the cabinet sooner rather than later, by ignoring what the whips are saying, that is a big standoff really between the two, because it's literally saying, I know this isn't good for me, but I'm not doing it because I disagree with it. Right, so they refuse to back Cummings, which is quite a big deal when you come to think of it.
Yeah, it is.
So it's just further to point out that there are party divisions along this. It's not just the Tories versus the world.
What would you do, James, if you were in?
Keep him.
Boris,
sorry.
Would you keep him?
I think this press conference is actually a good idea because you take away from Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, Rishi Sunak, Dominic Raab all defending him, and you literally say, "There's a microphone. There are the TV cameras. Sort it out yourself. If it goes horribly wrong, that's Dominic Cummings' problem, right? It would give them a reason to sort of stop backing him. But and I know that he like we were saying earlier, he could be a bit of a maverick and he might not come across brilliantly. But at least it's not like he's the silent party in this, right? So there were all the front pages of newspapers on over the weekend were pictures of Dominic Cummings as the press sort of harassed him as he was leaving his home, and he gave a few comments, but there was nothing really substantial, and the biggest defence he got was coming from other people. So just giving him the chance to defend himself, it just seems like it's an opportunity for the government to, as they'd always want to do, shift the focus elsewhere. So actually shift it onto Dominic Cummings. He can sort his own problems out, instead of us constantly trying to defend him and explain why he's in government.
But I think it'll be. I get why it's a good move because it shifts the focus from defending the political argument for Gove, Boris, Ritchie, Dominic Raab, etc. But however, I think could also backfire on them. I think it's just going to come off as he's going to go, oh, I did it, yeah, I would do it again, and he's going to come off really cold, and people are going to go, what, he's in government? Like, and he's going to come off because he never comes off well in the media, in my opinion. Like whenever you see him walking outside his house, and he's going to do it in a t-shirt and joggers.
I'm calling t-shirt and jeans. No, shirt and jeans actually.
No,
shirt and
joggers.
Jeans.
Joggers.
I bet you, Will, £3 he'll be wearing a shirt.
I'm not betting.
He's wearing a shirt, at least. Not a tie, though. Unbuttoned shirt.
How do you think Labour's dealing with this? The whole Dominic Cummings thing? Or what would you do if you were an opposition party?
Well, all the parties are calling for his resignation, which, as we were saying, either way is a lose-lose situation for the government. So by calling for his resignation, not only do they jump onto the bandwagon with the media, everybody hating him, so obviously, elevating themselves, but they would end up bringing the Conservative Party down, right? So look at them, they've hired a guy who's flouted the rules and he's had to be forced out because he's that useless, and it gets rid of competence in government, etc., etc., etc. So opposition party, this is a field day for them. This is, their perfect opportunity to...
Yeah.
There's no way that you could back him. Like if taking a pragmatic approach where it's, well, I can understand, it's just no, out, please, bye. And then you bring in the fact that it's like, people have sacrificed so much and Dominic Cummings can't even do that despite being the one who's brought in the rules. Yeah, this is just perfect for them, really. It's political Christmas.
What I would do, though, if I was the Labour Party is I would leave it. I'd say, yeah, we wanted to resign, but other than that, I would step back as far from the fight as I could, and I'd let the Tory party melt down for themselves, and watch the infighting go on. And because I think the Conservatives desperately want Labour to jump on the bandwagon now and attack, so they can go, oh, look what they did, they're creating a partisan, and it creates that partisan war again on Dominic Cummings, which the Conservatives can use to their advantage to get out of this. I think Labour needs to very much stay out of this and just let the Conservatives fight amongst themselves and come off incompetent amongst people. That's the way I see it going. Well, that's what I would do if I was an advisor to Keir, or if I was Keir. I'd just say, no, let's let them fight amongst themselves.
I think what they've got to do is they've got to point out the flaws and sort of find a way to criticise Cummings, right? And which is not a difficult thing to do, and state that he should resign. But then from then on, it's not like a constant, persistent push, because you are right. Let the cracks within the party just keep opening themselves up. By pushing and pushing and pushing, you end up taking the attention away from the Conservative Party fall down and more onto yourself. If that makes sense. So instead of Keir Starmer calls for Dominic Cummings to go, it would be Dominic Cummings causes rift within what's more important, right?
Well, I was watching I wasn't watching. I was listening to James O'Brien today, and the amount of people that said we're very much let down, and it's yet again one rule for all of us, and yet the Tory establishment does whatever they want. I think kind of like that. You have that working class. You're going to get Brexit done. You're on our side. Has now been destroyed through this. I think this is quite a big moment.
Well, I wouldn't have said it's like huge, as in I get that it's sort of one rule for them and another for the rest of us. I wouldn't say it's a huge... I think the bigger issue is Dominic Cummings as a person rather than this kind of like, look, we'll repay the voters kind of thing. I don't know.
Do you want me to make you feel how slow time's gone there? As of 366 days ago, Theresa May resigned as Prime Minister.
I know. I think that's gone really quickly.
It seems like 47 years ago.
Well, it's weird to think that Boris Johnson will nearly have been a year as PM.
Yeah, on the 24th of July. A year since Theresa May's resigned, and we've had the Tory leadership contest, Boris lying to the Queen.
The prorogation of Parliament, as it's more widely known, I think.
Then you had the extension to Brexit, and you had that dead in a ditch speech.
I'd rather be dead in a ditch than leave the EU after the 31st of October.
I remember telling you that's an election speech right there. Give it 2 weeks, an election will be called, because you had the whole police there on message. 20,000, I went, that's an election speech. Brexit was extended, an election was called, you had the election.
Back when times were much more simple.
Yeah, I love how we can go, back when times were more simple, and it was the most complicated time then.
The most complicated general election in a long time.
Yeah.
And that was just simple little chicken feed.
Missed them days, man. Then Jeremy Corbyn resigned. We've had Brexit. Then we've had the start of coronavirus. You had a later leadership context in the middle of that. I genuinely do think, though, coronavirus has scuppered a lot of Cummings' plans.
Oh, completely.
He had it all set on track. Yes, I've got the majority. I can pretty much do whatever I want now. Bang!
Is Cummings for or against HS2?
I don't know.
Because I hope he's against it, because then it'll get scrapped. It needs to go.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm not looking forward to it at the same time. This statement.
I can't wait. He never talks in public.
That's what I'm afraid of.
That's true. Yeah, Dominic Cummings doesn't like HS2, which means he needs to stay in government, because I hate HS2 too, as well, T-O-O. And therefore, that's why he's got to stay, because hopefully he'll try and scrap it.
Should we have our quick break now?
Watching Dominic Cummings.
We break now because I need the loo. So we do our go get a cup of coffee, blah blah blah.
Yeah, so well, we can take a break. We'll take a break now then. We'll get we'll get a drink, coffee, whatever, quickly, and then we'll sort of sit in silence. I'll turn my microphone off, whatever. Watch the Dominic Cummings speech, and then come back and have a chat.
Yeah, no problem. Yep, good.
See you in a bit. Hi there, me here in the edit. So I just thought I would say, a little bit echoing what Will and I said earlier. Now would be a good time to take a break, as we did. If you want to get yourself a drink, or you're not going to listen to this all the way through, now's your time. I've just left in a few bits this week from what I heard from Will's microphone. Yet again, mine was switched off. So we've just got to listen to what Will had to say. I also heard some football, so I've left that in. See if you can pick that up. Don't know why I was listening to that when he should have been listening to Dominic Cummings, but we'll leave that for him to explain. Oh, and finally, you may have noticed there are a few connection issues this week, so I'm sorry about that. I hope you can put up with it. It's not been too bad. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that whilst I'm on the microphone.
It's not, mate. You broke the rules. I'm sorry. Yeah, but he drove closer to. We drove 260 miles, mate, to go see him. 19.
So my take from that is, I listened to everything he had to say, and I'm pretty sure he acted fairly. And yes, I accept there's room for reasonable disagreement, but I really don't think that this should have been done earlier, and he admitted that himself. But I think he's good to go. Don't need to lock him up.
There's not a question of locking him up, but
I know.
He still violated the rule. Like, if me or you were in his position, yeah, we'd stay at home.
I think is the fact that it was, if there were going to be two ill parents, one of which, if his wife got really ill and he's working 16-hour days in Downing Street, or if they were both ill at the same time, or whatever it might be, then there couldn't have been any childcare. And this is for a 4-year-old child, not someone who can be self-sufficient.
Just because you have a child doesn't mean it's exceptional circumstances, though.
Well, it does. Childcare.
But James, most people at the moment went with those rules and made exceptional sacrifices, and just because he created the rule doesn't mean he can openly violate it. He still broke the rule.
I'm not sure. I think he acted reasonably, and I think, as you were saying, that there was 100% social distancing at all times. Yes, it might have been classed as unnecessary travel, but never anything worse than that. You got to remember, we aren't parents. Panicked parent acting on what they think is best. You wouldn't want to leave your child neglected when there could be a possibility. As you were saying, his nieces are 17 and 20. They can look after kids. They're not in an at-risk group. They're a very low risk. I really would, to anybody who is listening to this who hasn't seen the press conference, listen to it. It's about 20 minutes long, and the whole explanation and the story going through that, it's a bit long-winded, but I think it explains that at all points it was very socially distant, and there was no real flouting of the lockdown rules, essentially necessary travel. I think we're recording now.
Here we are.
Third time lucky. So let's assume that what I said has come across and it's actually saved and recorded, and if it hasn't, then I'll have to do some little voiceovery bits. But yeah, well, go on then, give us your take on this.
I think the way he came across was very good. He's got a sort of that Blair type round him of, he could always make it seem like he was the innocent party in this, but I still see through it. I still think, he broke the rules at the end of the day, and to tell everyone stay at home, and then you move. Other people moved as well, like the Scottish Health Minister. She moved to a second home. She still resigned. She still broke the rules at the end of the day. That's what I'd say on it.
I think it's all about context, which seems to have disappeared in modern media.
How many people had it and also had a child as well, and have not moved, but because he's Dominic Cummings, he can move.
See, I don't think it's because he's Dominic Cummings he's doing this. I think it's just because in a time that he sees as almost an emergency, it's some action that he could take to take precautions and reduce risk for his child and his family. Now, I understand other people haven't done that sort of thing, but I'm sure many parents would, given the opportunity, risk the rules. It's not the whole, look at me, I'm in the government, I don't have to say, I don't have to practice what I preach. I think it's more the fact of just like, yeah, I get it, these are the rules, this is what everybody should be doing, and I'm going to try and sort of squeeze through a little loophole here because I'm a bit panicked and a bit stressed about my child. So it's not the fact of other people are doing it and he isn't, and he's being cocky about it. I think it's just more of the fact that it's an option that he had to take, or he took the opportunity to reduce the risk. If that was, slightly dubious, like I was saying, as a parent, it's something you'd potentially be willing to do.
Yeah, but a lot of other people just stayed at home.
Yeah, I know that.
He's still, James, at the end of the day, he still broke the rule.
But he shouldn't resign.
No, but he should apologise. He's just said, people are very angry at me. I do not regret what I did. I believe I... Just say, look, I broke the rule. I understand why a lot of people are annoyed at me, etc., etc., etc.
He doesn't believe he broke the rules because of the emergency loophole to do with young or old people and protecting them.
At the end of the day, why is it... I know he lives in Durham, but it's the length of the country, James, as well.
Yeah, but the distance doesn't matter because he was shielding at all times, right? I get it's not like he's driven the length of the country to go on holiday. He's driven it because that's the only option he had. If they'd have lived in Nottingham, which is, half the length of the country from London, or if they'd have lived in Surrey, which is, a couple of miles down the road from London, he'd have still made the journey. It just happened to be the fact that he's from the northeast, so he's got to go and see his family.
Don't ever do the accent ever again.
He's from the northeast, so he's got to go and see his family. That's the only option he had. They are that was the most, or not convenient, but the most reasonable people to, could go to his closest family, and it's his sister and his nieces who are young and not at risk.
My point of view is he's set out these rules, but I bet you there's so many other cases of parents having children and they also have COVID, but you don't read news stories about them travelling the length of the country.
That's because they're not the PM's special advisor. It will have happened elsewhere.
Other people have obeyed the rule. Like, he still broke the rules, James, at the end of the day.
Well, the PM doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it. So he didn't break the rules. If the people who set the rules saying he didn't break the rules, then maybe he didn't break the rules. And if he did break the rules, he's not going to apologise because he doesn't believe he did, right? So almost, if he apologised, it was almost like an admission of guilt. And so he's explained it, and he's saying, I get you might not agree with me, and I don't regret it because I took this action, as your parent trying to protect a child. But it's not like he said, middle finger up to you all, I'm going to do what I want to do. He's come out and explained it to everybody, 20-minute length explanation through it all. It's not a decision he obviously took lightly. He talked about discussing it with the PM whilst they were both really ill, and it was all about trying to keep his family protected, but also finding a way for him to get back to work when lots of people in the government were off ill.
I say we should move on to this now because we could just keep going round and round in circles.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is the first thing on the podcast we've had a big debate on.
Yeah, well, I just think at the end of the day, he's got to accept, now he's caused a massive rift in himself as well, because people go, the government's now disobeying the rule, and he's got to realise the consequences of his actions for doing that, and he's not even apologised for that.
He's not a widely liked guy. He's done something controversial. The only way it is ever going to go is it's going to fill newspaper headlines and distract from other things. And he did say at the start that he should, he feels like he should have done it earlier, and he shouldn't have left it late, and they shouldn't have expected it just to fly under the radar. This podcast is really difficult to record just because we've straight away come from watching it. We've got our own kind of opinions. I never get how literally a journalist will listen to something and straight away go bang, 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 bang. The thing is, as you said, you don't know if you've kind of been charmed by the speech, and whether I'm not being critical enough. Obviously, I don't think Dominic Cummings acted perfectly just because he did drive half, up the length of England. But it's really hard to gauge. But yeah, my instant reaction was fair enough, mate. Pretty much.
I can never be an instant reaction journalist.
We can't echo any opinions, Will, which is what this podcast is really good at. Shall we just move on? So, Will, what's next? Christ.
Bozzer.
Boris Johnson and the lack of...
Where is he? Last 3 appearances, press conference, Prime Minister's questions, Prime Minister's questions. 3 appearances in 2 weeks. You're the head of the government. Yes, you're making an appearance today, which is an improvement. He needs to be a visible presence every day. I mean, we'll go back to it again. 4 weeks ago now, he said he wanted a transparent government. So if you want a transparent government, you need to be held account to every single day. This is not leadership that we need at the moment. We need someone who's visible, can be held to account, and can answer the questions every single day. Not a man who's hiding in Downing Street, running scared every week, because that's what it seems like. We need a guy who's going to be out there every single day.
Well, even if it's not, spending half an hour at the press conference, it's literally just get some advisors to prepare 3 quick-fire questions and do, a 5-minute video. Some sort of video that shows I'm here, I'm still concerned with this. Because when some low-ranking cabinet minister comes on and says...
It's like when I messaged you the other day, who the hell is this guy?
The environment secretary or something, and it's just, they come on and they go, hello, look, oh, well, we're doing our best to tackle it, and this has happened, and then...
Exactly. To keep people intrigued, he needs to be up there to keep people alert to this, because when you wheel out Grant Shapps or you wheel out the community secretary, they're going to turn off. They're not going to be interested. It's like me and you, we're diehard. Like, we love politics and we pay so much attention to it. But when they wheel out them, we just turn off. We don't even pay attention to it. When Boris comes on, or Richie, people will watch it.
I think the press conferences should always be done. But if they can't be done by Boris Johnson for whatever reason, it should either be Rishi Sunak, Michael Gove, or Dominic Raab, or Matt Hancock. The 4 leading cabinet ministers. I mean, not Dominic Raab because he's useless, but at least he is, well known, and he's the first Secretary of State. You shouldn't be getting out, sort of like the Environment Secretary, or maybe Gavin Williamson when it comes to schools and doing an announcement there every now and again. You really should try and keep it to the core, and the ministers people recognise as an authoritative figure, not just another guy in a suit.
I even think, just to keep people engaged in this, Boris needs to come out every single day on television, to keep them up to date, because they'll listen to him because he's the top guy.
Is it going to be inflation of Boris Johnson in the fact that if he makes so many speeches, they won't be worth as much?
That's very true, but he needs to be out there most days, not going a week without saying anything. Like before he made a speech to the Commons about lifting lockdown, and then it was 11 days before he made a press conference. He can't take those big gaps. He needs to be out. I can get why it's not every day, but every other day, or enough time throughout the week.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. He's a busy guy. He's got a lot to do, but, but just go to bed half an hour later and do half an hour press conference.
And it doesn't present that strong leadership. And then look how we look to the rest of the world. We look weak. Where's our Prime Minister gone? Oh, he's running about again.
I hate to say it, guys, but this is going to be very Dominic Cummings heavy. There's not actually been a lot going on, really.
US politics-wise?
No, not really. Go on then, Will. Fill us in.
US politics, Trump has now probably completely abandoned any tackling or talking of coronavirus.
Maybe that's what Boris is trying to do.
Which is amazing, because they're now approaching 100,000 deaths. It's going to be in the next week or so. You've seen the New York Times headline, haven't you? Or the front cover yesterday.
That was astounding.
So the New York Times, probably the most prevalent newspaper in the whole of America, would you say? It's kind of like the Times over here. But they completely dedicate the whole front cover to all the people that had died from coronavirus. Every single name. Bear in mind, it's a broadsheet newspaper. Every single name and age of who's died. Let me try and get the headline up. US deaths near 100,000, an incalculable loss. It's massive. They couldn't fit everyone on the front page, so they had to go on to the second page.
It's very stirring. It gets people thinking.
It's emotive. It's very powerful.
It makes it more than just numbers. Without wanting to be rude, it's almost you're desensitized to it now. The daily figure keeps creeping up and up. The New York Times, by publishing this, it brings it right back to your heart. These are actual real people, names and ages of 100,000 different people in the US, and so I think it was a really good piece of journalism. So it's the antithesis of worst article of the week, best article of the week, Will.
Yeah, so let's just put it like this. In 3 months, on top of how many deaths you already have over those 3 months, an extra 100,000 people have died. That's more than the capacity of Wembley Stadium. So just think of that. Wembley Stadium filled of all the people that have died on top of what's already. And then you look down into the deeper impacts. That's, like you said, 100,000 families. How many hundred thousands of friends, millions of people have all been affected? Well, we have all been affected by this, but just think of that people that have died because of this. It brought it home. So that's more people than Vietnam, the Korean War, the Iraq War, the events of 9/11 and the Afghanistan War put together.
That is unbelievable.
In 3 months. So they lost, I think it was something like 50,000 soldiers that died in Vietnam over 10 years. They'd lost double that amount in 3 months.
And Vietnam was an absolute disaster. Vietnam was an absolute disaster for the US. You know, it's revered as one of the wars that was so unnecessary and so awful, and it's a complete mark on US history. And so to tackling a crisis even worse, you know, and it's a completely different scenario. And you know, it's not really comparing apples with apples; it's more comparing apples with elephants. But I think at the end of the day, it just highlights the scale of this issue in the fact that the US's hugest political disaster of recent history is no longer the Vietnam War.
More on the USA is so polls are showing that Biden has opened up 11% lead in the polls. I don't believe it. I never believe any of the polling numbers in America. Trump's desperately trying to focus on this election now and not coronavirus, so he's desperately still trying to. Obamagate's been dropped at the moment. His now slogan is like transition into greatness, and he's now focusing on we're doing XYZ, and now is focusing on, look what we're going to build now. Since
certainly not a wall, is it?
Yeah, we're going to get back there now, and it's like he's now desperately trying to take all the focus away from coronavirus because he realises. But did you see the other day when the press secretary released his bank statement, like his banking details?
Sorry, what?
You not seen that? Yeah, she held up like pieces of paper. And it apparently had Trump's banking details on it, something like that.
And is that the one we discussed last week? Another thing about Trump, this is another potential topic for worst news article of the week, just because it's not a bad article, but as a news story, this mythical drug, it's a malaria drug that Donald Trump is saying it works wonders for coronavirus. He said he's been taking it as a preventative measure, and it's called Hydroxychloroquine. Now, it's like a 200 milligram tablet and it's meant to cure malaria. The sales of this soared when Donald Trump mentioned this. There is potential that it increases the risk of mortality, right? So it's not just like he's recommended a treatment that doesn't work, but according to one study was published on Friday showing that the anti-malarial drug increased risk of mortality by 34%, and with 130% increased risk of heart arrhythmias. I don't know what that word means, but I'm guessing it's to do with rhythm and your heartbeat. So basically, Donald Trump's been recommending a dangerous drug that hasn't been scientifically proven to help cure coronavirus. Now, there are anecdotes and people saying that it has helped, and the prescription has gone up to 830,000 people now taking it, 80% up on the previous March. So that was 830,000 people at March, and it's 8% higher. Now, as James O'Brien would say, plural of anecdote isn't evidence. You can get lots of anecdotes saying that this drug has helped, but there's no scientific backing behind it. But there is scientific backing behind the fact that it is more dangerous, right? So this is Donald Trump who's been recommending a drug, and many people have followed it, both his supporters and just people looking for some hope and some protection who are getting a bit scared. And there's potential this is making life more dangerous in the US. I mean, it's just unbelievable how in modern politics that sort of thing can just go on in the global pandemic. Trump's taking it himself, apparently.
He is. That was last week. So yeah. Hello. I've just given up with Trump and dealing with coronavirus now. It's just.
Yeah, no, it's getting a bit monotonous. It's look, he's completely useless.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm now focusing on the election.
This whole issue has been about the election, really, because it's come at the wrong time, just as he was beginning to sort of rally up the base. However, it could be helpful for Mr. Biden, just simply because 2008 Obama gets elected, right? And his job is to reconstruct the country after the financial crisis, right? This crisis is much larger than that, and that was something that was hugely significant at the time and still has echoes today. If you ignore coronavirus, sort of up until coronavirus and the recession it's caused. And so with that, it could be a campaigning point for Joe Biden. Like, look, Donald Trump claims he's been brilliantly successful with the economy, but we put in all the groundwork for that. And I'll let you know. And so that could be a good campaigning point is, look, if you want somebody to reconstruct the economy, we've done this before, vote me in and we'll sort it out.
Yes, but Obama's criticised because a lot of people, like in the Rust Belt areas with free trade agreements, lost their jobs. I would more or less focus on all the stuff that Trump's done in the past 3 months, like such as... So he bailed out Wall Street, gave them that massive stimulus package, but however, ordinary citizens he's just left behind. But that's why we have 33 million unemployed at the moment, all because of him. Like, I wouldn't necessarily focus on what he has done as vice president. I'd focus on what Trump has. I'd rather attack Trump than...
So are we going from the American economy onto the British economy?
Can do.
For those of you who don't know, and that'll be none of you, we're going to have a recession. Yay! Everybody get your party hats on, get the music going, the disco ball.
Get in.
For our age group, there'll be no jobs. Woo! No jobs! Yay! No money! Jobs, jobs, jobs. So what's happened is we are heading towards 10% unemployment, which hasn't been seen since the 1980s, so that's fun. And so there are now 2.1 million people last month on universal credit, which is basically a bit like benefits for those of you who don't know what universal credit is, but you should do, so now you do. So 850,000 people more than the previous month, which is unbelievable. Now, there has been the furlough scheme, which has been brilliant for protecting jobs in people. That means that the government, pay the wages of the people instead of the government's just letting them go, and so by that, it sort of delays the fact until the businesses can get going again, and the business will pick up and they can afford to pay their own staff. The importance of this is Britain is really good for employment, right? Up until this, we had I think it was about 2% unemployment rate, which is really good in Europe. France is about 10 or something. Germany's higher than us, and obviously Germans, the German economy is admired to be something brilliant. Greece was like 25% or something. So for Britain to have a 10% unemployment rate is a huge thing. And for young people like us, companies might not want to start taking on and training up students fresh out of university. So it's not looking brilliant. I don't want to scare you all, but, just got to be honest. Right? Basically, do a degree in maths and you'll always get a job, or do something medical and you'll always get a job. If not, and you want to study art or music, say goodbye to any hopes and dreams you've ever had, because you'll be sitting on a park bench humming away to yourself, about Mozart, which you studied at university with huge amounts of debt, but you'll never ever get a job because coronavirus has shafted us all. Was that positive, Will?
Yeah.
Another thing to say, Jaguar Land Rover, a company that I love because they make wonderful cars and I'm a petrol head, are begging for a bailout from the government. Now, they weren't doing very well in the first place just because the Chinese market was drying up. And so this is like last year. They were on a bit of a downturn. They were struggling. People weren't buying new cars. They make a lot of diesel cars. They didn't have huge amounts of electric cars or hybrids on offer. So people were buying less Jaguars or Land Rovers. They're a company together in favour of other things. And because of coronavirus, car sales are dropping and they're not doing very well, which is bad because they employ 40,000 people in Britain. So finally, the Economic Outlook by David Smith is really interesting column written in the Sunday Times. So job growth has fallen off a cliff. Annual number of people who were employed in Britain was going up between 1 and 2% over the past 5 years. Now it's negative, obviously. Median pay growth was going up between 1 and 5% over the past 5 years. That's now dropped again. And I don't really need statistics to show this. Things aren't great for the economy right now. Another load of statistics to show you. So in March, the government predicted they would be borrowing £55 billion for the 2020 to 21 year. so March through to March in their budget. In April, they borrowed £62 billion, so already outstripping a whole year's worth of borrowing. And so, but the most important thing in this article is that the Bank of England were considering a negative interest rate. Now, interest rates are quite intriguing in the fact that they really do dictate how people spend. And we've got a 0.1% interest rate, which is the lowest it's ever been, right? So if you're saving money, there is really very little incentive to do that because the banks won't pay you very much money back for saving that money, right? So if interest rates are really high, it's probably because the government want people to be more careful with their spending, and so they'll reward people for saving by giving them high interest rates. So, a certain percentage of money you save is then paid back to you for keeping your money in the bank. Now, a negative interest rate that the Bank of England would set would mean that banks themselves would be charged money for keeping their money in the Bank of England, right? And so what that means is then the banks have got an incentive to loan, right? Because it actually costs them money to keep money in the bank. If they're lending more, that's going to increase economic growth because there'll be more people spending. It'll be easier to get a loan to buy a car or a new flat or whatever it might be. And so the banks will almost be forced to take more risks. It can stimulate growth, and the sheer complexity of the issue is mind-boggling. Like negative interest rates, charging banks to keep their own money. Just in the idea of trying to get more people to spend more and, whiz the economy up again. In short, it's not looking good for us in the future, but things aren't going to be in dire straits forever.
Worst news story, James?
What was yours?
I think what really annoyed me this week, and it's not necessarily a new story, but it's just a line of question they asked Boris yesterday. It was a golden opportunity. They missed it. Boris likes to ramble and go round a question, not directly asking it. I think what journalists needed to do was just attack it straight away, like going, "Did you know about it? Yes or no?" Bang. Just yes or no, and watch them crumble from there. And because they just drone on, they get a really long-winded response back, and it's not the journalism that we want. One of you go to Boris. Did you know about Dominic Cummings going to Durham? Yes or no? Because that's the question that was all on our lips. Did Boris know anything about it?
Now, in this feature for Worst News Article of the Week, I normally go on to the Guardian opinion and scroll through until I see a headline that I think, that's a bit unreasonable. Read the article, read a few others, and then I decide which one that I'm going to moan about. However, very surprisingly, this week I found an article that I thought was bloody brilliant. So I thought, hey, yeah, and I'll praise the Guardian. So the article is by Timothy Garton Ash. And the headline is, Britain's pride in its past is not matched by any vision for its future. So I'll very quickly just summarise the article. So the article comes with a cartoon, and the cartoon's a Spitfire flying into some clouds, some dark-looking, thundery clouds. Now, what that links to the whole article. The whole time through coronavirus, we've been talking about this. Britain's pride in World War II. We've done this before. We've come through a crisis. National unity. Everything's going to be okay, etc., etc., etc. So we were very good at saying, look at how we were in the past. This is how things used to be. Brexit, for example, take back control was the slogan. It's all about we used to have complete sovereignty over this. We never used to be reliant on the EU. We've been on our own before. We survived thousands of years without the EU. And so Britain is very good at looking through rose-tinted spectacles at our past and saying, aren't we lovely? We saw it with VE Day. It's great to celebrate, but it just reminds us constantly of Britain looking back. He brings in some statistics, which is actually really interesting. And so I'll just read from the article right now. A Times YouGov poll recently asked the people of Britain, France, the US and Germany which of the wartime allies contributed most to defeating Nazi Germany. A clear winner in the other three countries was the US, with less than 10% of respondents saying Britain. But in Britain itself, a staggering 47% said Britain played the most significant part, with less than a quarter of British people identifying either the US or the Soviet Union. Another quote from the article that applies is, the only major conflict that this country has ever stood alone in without an ally on the continent was the War of American Independence, and we lost it. And so it's this kind of British exceptionalism that we keep banging on about. And so the article it's not very critical of that. It's basically saying, we're very good at it and it's not completely helpful. But the point of it more is, and this is something that I've been thinking of, what are we doing in the future? Where are we going? I care where we've come from. It's very important to have a pride in your past.
Well, it's
but
more
Britain
important to look to the future.
Exactly. Britain never seems to. We were very good at being nostalgic. We're not a country that's forward-looking. You take Germany, from the ruins of the Second World War, they're now the strongest economy in Europe. Now, the EU has helped them a lot with that by having a weak euro, and so German exports are cheaper than they could be if they weren't in the EU. But that's regardless. They're in the EU. They've got a plan. They've used things to their advantage, etc., etc., etc. We're not a country of forward thinking. We're very much. The Brexit process has highlighted this. It's very much in the past we did this, and there's just no future planning and forward thinking. It's very short term, and there's no. What direction is Britain going in now politically? What is our plan for the future?
The world's changed a lot in 75 years, or 80 years now. Let's look to the future instead of looking to the past, because it's totally changed. The game's totally changed now.
Exactly. And that's the main issue. We know what we were doing in 1940, but what are we doing in 2040?
Exactly.
Where is Britain going?
That's a great soundbite, actually.
I did steal that from the article, so well done, The Guardian. This week you have knocked my socks off and actually tackled an issue that I do care about. This podcast, Will, is really changing me.
I know, Keir Starmer fan, now you're a Guardian fan, too.
Not quite, for either of them. So that was our news articles. I'll be playing a game, Will.
We can play a game.
So I've come up with today's game. I've turned it political. It's never not, it's... So the game is very simple. It starts off by naming sort of some notable MPs, right? And so I could mention Dominic Raab. And so in the example I gave to Will would have to take the R from Dominic Raab's second name and find the first name of an MP with a name beginning with R. So Dominic Raab, Rishi Sunak. So then we've got S. So then Stephen Kinnock, K, etc., etc., etc. That's it. There's not really much to explain. So we can just start. Will, you can start. A notable MP, because so you can't name someone vague who could be made up. We're gonna. Will and I just did a little test round then, and we decided that you need, if there's 10 seconds to think of an MP, and if you don't think of them in 10 seconds, the other person gets a point, and whoever gets the most points after, let's say, 5 rounds, first to 3 points. Yeah.
You serve.
Jacob Rees-Mogg. So we'll go with the M.
Michael Gove.
G. Gordon Brown.
Ben Bradshaw.
Boris Johnson.
I can't use Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jeremy Hunt. Oh.
Hillary Benn.
No.
I think it might be 10 seconds. I don't know. Quick, Will. Okay.
Well done, James.
It's so difficult.
I hated that.
Right.
Clement Attlee.
Oh no, he's not an MP. Alistair Darling.
Diane Abbott.
Oh, not A again. No.
I think that's 10.
Can you think of one? I can't think of one. Hey, there'll be some sort of Alex or Aaron or Andy or Andy Burnham, right? So 1-1. Okay, my turn to serve. Chuka Amuna.
Angela Rayner.
I swear it begins with a U. Is it not Umuna or is it Amuna?
Umuna.
Yeah, so it can't be Angela Rayner.
I thought you said Amuna, because you said Amuna.
I don't know how you spell
How
it.
do you start with a U? To name me a name that starts with a U.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah, it starts with a U, Will. That's the whole point.
Name me a name that starts with a U. Right, so it's 2-1. Well done, James.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah, so there we are, Will. Scuppered you there. Turn to serve.
Richie Sunak.
Simon Clark.
C. No, I've run out.
Is it 3-1?
Yeah, it's 3-1.
Do you want to do another round?
Go on then.
Steve Barclay.
Bees again. No, I'm out.
Great, that went well.
So we're never playing this game again. I hate this game.
I'm quite good at these games, Will.
Yeah, I know you are.
That was short but sweet. That game, quite fun. But yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen with this week's podcast simply because,
All in different bits.
yeah, it's in lots of different bits and the Wi-Fi has not been helpful. I'll try and piece it together in the edit, although I'm not doing any tonight. I want to go on a walk or a bike ride. There's a field of cows that I found and they're my new best friends, so I might go and see them. So yeah, we can wrap up now. I have no idea. This has been the worst podcast recording we've done so far, simply because it's just such a pain in the arse. And Dominic Cummings had to plan his speech just an hour.
Yeah, and Dominic Cummings was half an hour late. Yeah.
Although he did apologise for being late, that's the only apology he did do. The rest was simply explanation. Make of that what you will. Anyway, thank you for listening to Something Near the Centre. Sorry it's been slightly problematic and a little bit sporadic today. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. We hope this isn't too chaotic. I'm going to stop waffling now. Goodbye.
Goodbye, guys. That's the worst what we've done.
It will. Come on. I'm in the edit here. And now I'm just going to be sitting there tomorrow morning with my head in my hand. You've been listening to Something Near the Centre, a podcast about politics, economics and current events. The presenters were Will Turner and James Baker, and the editing was done by me, James Baker. Thank you for listening. See you again soon.